Now, a pluralist society has vast variety of value systems. Each sector can have its own god, in the sense that there's of the possible value systems that sector could have, be it economic, political, educational, media type stuff, you could have a philosophy that dominates the other possible and perhaps present philosophies that are also in it. If the sector itself gets overtaken by one dominant view, it becomes very effective and powerful in pushing that view on the rest of society, because each sector is necessary for the society to work. So in some sense, any single sector can be very effective, very dominant compared to other sectors that are pluralist and not dominated by one particular view. So finance can be extremely effective in a society simply because it's dominated by one set of bankers, say. As we've said, the military can be dominated by the fact that it's already so hierarchical and pyramid structure that power is in the hands of the generals at the top, and they can stage a coup. A couple of them get together and, my goodness, they're going to use the power that their very sector is prided in having dominance over the rest, if necessary. The religious sector might be dominated by one particular religion, and that makes that sector very powerful vis-a-vis other sectors in society. The executive sector is constructed hierarchically in that, the Prime Minister might be the equal among equals, but he's not, is he? Calling the agenda gives you a lot of power, and you are the focus of the career goals of the members within the executive. Everyone wants to be a Prime Minister, sort of thing, because they know it is a focal point of power. And we almost pride ourselves on letting the government have the dominance among the other sectors in the pluralist society, but we're not happy with that. We try to make that level democratic. In a communist society, you make the lower levels democratic. If you work in a business, you should have a say in what the business, how it's managed and so on. So there are communes at every level. The weakness of the system seems to be that the commune at the top level can be easily taken over. It's a committee, and committees can fall into the hands of one fairly easily. And the committees as units form a hierarchical pyramid, which means if you control the top committee, you control everything. Of course, the background problem is that even if you do work out the ideal constitution, how do you stop it being changed? And to some extent, you need an ability to change it from time to time so that it becomes perhaps more appropriate to your changing world. The immediate one is, in times of war, you want a very decisive decision-making political system. You need a wartime cabinet, you need a leader who is an absolute warmonger and is going to win, like Churchill or Hitler or Stalin or Roosevelt. They each did it in different ways, but they had the power to hand. Hitler and Stalin by force, Churchill and Roosevelt by cunning manipulation of public opinion, by staged identification of external enemy being recognized. The classic being Pearl Harbor, of course, unquestionably staged to get American opinion, popular opinion, behind the president in having a war in Europe, in being part of the war in Europe. In the modern world, it's been the war on terror. We've created an enemy that justified emergency powers. And the sequel to this is the pandemic, of course, the evil that has to be overcome at all costs, and the cost is all. When the fundamental power structure that exists is identified, then of course how to use it to one's advantage becomes crucial in defending and promoting what you truly value. So if I'm a businessman, I value business and control of industry and making other sectors of the pluralist society in some sense subservient to it. If it's finance, I control the banks. If it's the control of ideas, I control the media and all the elements of socialization for the longer run control. Education's a major one, isn't it? If it's technology, then I start to control, for instance, the medical profession. I put managers in, and managers can be controlled hierarchically from a leadership point of view and steer that body in a certain direction. I only have to then bring together one or two of the major pluralist bodies into hierarchical totalitarian control, and then coordinate them. If I've got power over those, my goodness, I can wipe out the rest of the sectors easily. We can see this originally in the past where regional powers, the UK is probably the best example, knew the importance of Europe as regards regional power, tried to always maintain a balance in Europe, not let it be ruled by one other power. So joined the weaker side on any war that was going on. You could say a balance of power was in the interests of the United Kingdom, or you could say, no, the United Kingdom actually dominated with its empire by keeping Europe in a balance of power. By Europe, I mean, of course, the continent. Continental Europe. In other words, kept its opposition weak to its international empire. It was an interesting strategy of world dominance being more important than dominance of Europe. We, the British, focused on an empire early on as being our goal, not the control of Europe. And if anyone took control of Europe, that would be a real threat to us. But our empire made us strong enough to never be threatened by Europe, really. And until we wasted our strength in keeping the balance of power in Europe, 2 world wars, which utterly impoverished our empire, so much so that after the Second World War we just gave it away, gave it back to the indigenous people. It's not that they effectively seized it, it's that we didn't have the resources to, or the potential benefit from it any longer. It was no longer of value to us, especially in the post-Second World War climate of independence and the American lack of sympathy, of course, for empires. Though we did see America change course and become the empire of the 20th century, battling with another Cold War superpower. Supposedly named communist, but of course not remotely communist any more than communism has been in practice. Ever since the Russian Revolution. The battle has increasingly been for control of the value system. A pluralist society allows you to be dominant as a person in any one of the sectors, to express your value system, to apply it, engage it in your society, in that sector. Gives you a satisfaction and opportunity to exercise your values. Meets the requirement of the universe of uncertainty, in that it allows each individual possibility of exercising what it wants to do and wants to be, and find out the consequences of such. When totalitarian regimes take over, individuals in particular But whole regimes too. This allows mankind to experience what some of mankind wishes to be and to do and to have power. And in the flux of change and the instability, there shifts and changes through time and may even dissolve into what we might think of as a democratic, effective, pluralist society where there's a greater harmony between the disparate value systems. And then it reverts or swings or oscillates back into situations of uniformity and control and totalitarianism, which is also an experience that some souls long to exercise. So the universe, the uncertain and change, meets the disparate requirements of the children of God through time, not in any one time. And those groups whose needs and desires are not met cry out, if you like, to God for a change. And that change comes at some point, and they exercise their values and learn the lessons accordingly from the results of doing so. So the universe ever changes and oscillates and varies and responds to the needs and the demands of the children in it. And the children that could be in it, that wait, if you like, soul-wise, perhaps 1,000 years for an opportunity to express what they value and experience the consequences. And they express it in the context of populations that are expressing what they wanted to find out and experience and value, and whose values have to change in order to ever be acceptable in the kingdom of heaven, in the family of God as adults. And until then they remain as children, in strife and variability, joy and despair, oscillating, you might say, according to whichever way the wind blows, whatever circumstance they're in, trying to practice and experience what they value. Meeting the hard realities of trying to live with what others value that may or may not be consistent with what they value, may or may not be in harmony, and if it's not in harmony, it's great distress. So overall, this quest for an adequate democracy, as we see it, in both. Whether it's the communist view, commune idea of democracy at every level, or the Western democratic view of democracy, of the top being in some sense democratic, spread of power directly by a voting system at the bottom, which is not really true, of course. It's a facade of power spreading to the people that keeps the people quiet, really. It's a delusion, I think. For no individual could possibly have an effective say through a voting system. You're only one of millions of people. Rationally, it's never logical to bother to vote. The cost to you of getting to the polling station and missing a quarter of an hour is not worth it, or even bother to go online and choose. It's not going to make any difference to the outcome, your vote. The probability of your vote being crucial in the outcome is unquestionably approaching zero. In any large society, of course. Rationally, nobody would vote, except they had a principle that said they should vote, even though it can make no difference as an individual. And of course the should is only effective if a large enough body of people think they should vote. So you need at the very least, you need a society in which there's enough value, climate, for the population to actually vote. If they vote because of some dominant totalitarian leadership insisting they vote, well, if it's that dominant, it can probably ignore the outcome or deceive the populace as regards what the actual vote is. What we strive to do in the West is to have a constitution that, or what we may strive to do or want to strive to do, and many of us may not want to, but is to have a constitution that in some sense is totalitarian as regards protecting freedom and rights of the individual. But not to the extent that you end up with no government and the freedom of rights is not governed and ruled at all. Well, that's chaos, of course. That's the downfall of civilization. You've got rioting in the streets, people looting and so forth. So, I mean, you need control with freedom, and that's where the flux, the very root of the interchange and the instability ever resides. It's at a principle level that you want both civilization, government, rule, but you want freedom of rights. And your freedom of right ever strives with my freedom of right, which is different because we have different values. So the society tries to steer by seizing the helm, controlling the values that you have, controlling the institutions that socialize its people. That's the long run strategy. In the short run, it's very hard to do, to change the values of the people. But technological innovations allow you to control the media, the information, the news, in such a way that you can control the people so that if one power broker starts to take the ascendance in the whole matrix of power in the society and seizes the media, then he may start to control the long-run socialization process of the whole society. Nothing new here. How has man traditionally controlled his values and his mind and his coordination with others? By prayer, by devotion, by a control of himself, a deliberate steering of the mind. He's controlled it from a value system that he finds that he has. Might be a religion, typically, in the past. And from that value system, he makes a society, but the value system has been somehow nurtured so that it's common across the society. And that's all that we're doing in the modern state now. We're trying to find a value system that's common, and it's called political correctness. And it's being engineered, of course, by the state in order to harmonize disparate groups in the long run, basically getting rid of their individuality as regards different belief systems. Where has this plurality of religious views and philosophical views come from? Why is it suddenly on the table, so to speak, in the 21st century especially? It's because of globalization, the change in our technology, both as regards transport early on, back in the 19th century, and communications in the 20th century, and technological innovations in communication in the 21st century, developing on internet and so forth. If you have control of this communication leviathan, wow, that's changed politics forever. Unless it's so unstable it destroys itself. And of course it is, because, well, the next technology seems a bit frightening from our point of view, because it changes the nature of human beings from being the expression of their individual values to a common subservient value. But of course, the deep spiritual demands of souls that come to this universe is to exercise their own values. And they press for a situation in which they can do that. And that pressure is outside the system. Which I mean, it's in some sense, it's in God's hands. What needs to be expressed in the universe of uncertainty. So you could say that when it's dominated by some particular body, be it a religious leadership or economic leadership or military leadership, or landowning leadership, aristocracy, whatever it is, it's because that's the need. Outside of the universe of uncertainty that is at present being put upon the universe of uncertainty. Put very simply, it's the God has it for a good reason, given what he's doing for the kingdom of heaven, by which I mean how he's bringing children into adulthood for adult harmonious life in the heavenly family, the heavenly host. To do that, we must acquire the values of harmony necessary for the vast variety and uniqueness of individuality in heaven, to live in harmony and happiness and joy and peace, and continue to do so. You can't let people into heaven until they are going to be harmonious with heaven. That they introduce certainly their individuality to bless, but not an individuality that would be a curse. That's the function of this universe. At any one time, what's happening in the universe might seem appalling. It does, but almost every time, from one perspective or another. It's an incredibly, what we would term, inhumane, warring, discontent, wretched situation. But it's a necessary experience to change our values, to develop our values into a safe, safe achievement of personality, of personhood, such that we can abide in heaven forever in harmony and joy and goodness. All things work together to good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. This is true, but in fact all things work together for good of all life. For God cares for all. Everything that is moving towards what he values. He's creating it. He's bringing us up. He's bringing us to maturity such that we can be wonderful beings as he is. In that sense, all things work together to good. Period. And by which I mean full stop. It doesn't have to be qualified. It is both to those that at present love God and those that do not. It is still to their good. It's just that they have a value system which is self-destruct, and they don't either appreciate that or are not concerned about such. The time hasn't caught up with them yet. They're living, if you like, in the present, which is what kids do. They're myopic. They only see life from their own feeling point of view, their own perspective, and their own perspective not just in place, but in time. They don't see it from what we might term their point of view in 100 years' time, or 50 years' time, or even tomorrow. They take no thought for the morrow, for the wrong reason, not because they have faith and trust in God, but because they're just too busy ignoring tomorrow, because they only feel today. In other words, they're only living in the present, they're not living in eternity. And so not valuing eternity, then not doing that which safeguards their eternity to happiness and joy. Only the present time to happiness and joy. I like the cake, I'll have another one and another until I don't like any more cakes at the minute. Wow. This is not something to be despised, of course. We are children becoming fantastic adults. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for that. We are becoming fantastic adults because of you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Heavenly Father.
Well, I had some difficulty as regards whether I should publish this particular recording or not. And there's too much in it that I think is of value, despite what from my narrow perspective I suspect could be wrong. So I just put it out there and see what God does with it. Thank you, Heavenly Father.